All right, can everybody see my screen? Forgive me, let me try this one more time. All right, I'm seeing some yeses here. Here we go.
Yes, we can.
All right,
we
perfect. Here, all right. Okay, it is such a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'm coming to you live from my home in San Diego. Normally, I would take the train up to come and visit everybody, but obviously, this is where we are. And I want to make this presentation as useful as humanly possible for you guys. So if into the chat bar, if you let me know, I want to know how many of you guys are pre-med, how many of you guys are pre-something else. And so if you can type that in, that'll help me sort of see where we're at. The title of today is called The Wow Factor, How to Choose the Right Pre-Health Activities for You. I will use pre-health and pre-med interchangeably. It looks like all of the first responses are from pre-meds, which of course you'd expect the pre-meds to chime in first, wouldn't you? But I think the presentation will be useful no matter what your emphasis is. So I'm seeing a pre-health. I'm seeing some more pre-health. So I think this will be useful. I want to start, though, by putting you in the shoes of the admissions committee. You have two very qualified candidates. Student A has a 3.8 GPA. Very good. Student A has a 517 MCAT. Very good. And the most notable extracurricular activity that student A has is they shadowed a surgeon for 6 months. That's student A. Student B also has a 3.8, also has a 517, and the most notable extracurricular is that she lobbied the government of Guatemala to implement her findings on infant mortality, saving the lives of baby Guatemalans. So you can only pick one, and before you vote, let's learn more about who these people actually are. Student A did shadowing for 6 months, did research, had her own project, was the vice president of a pre-med club, did 200 hours of volunteering, and even was a TA for 3 classes as an undergrad. Student B also did volunteering for 200 hours, was the founder of the Guatemala Club, which took undergraduates from her college and sent them down to Guatemala to do public health research. As a part of that, she got on the floor of the Guatemalan Senate to talk about what she was doing and what her compatriots were doing, and raised over $25,000 for the cause. So you can only pick one, and I want you to type into the chat box, how many of you guys would choose student A? How many would choose student B? I am seeing a clear majority of student B. Student B is up to 80%, 90%, and that about jibes with what admissions officers would tell you too. And the question is why? Did student B work harder than student A? No. They both worked very hard. Was student B somehow more intelligent or talented? No. So what do you think it is if you had to put it into words? Why did most of you choose student B? All right, Arian says passion. Passion, I love it. It's such an overused word. I agree that you see her passion. Yu Ching says unique. I completely agree. Student B is much more unique. Junsu says student B seems more self-driven. Teresa said they did something unique and really brought about change. I think you guys are all hinting at it. Let me give you a fancy psychological term. It's called the failed simulation effect. What this says is that activities that are hard to explain are more impressive than activities that are just hard to do. It's hard to get a 3.8 and follow a surgeon around for 200 hours, but it's not hard to explain. If you wanted to take the next step, you'd go meet a surgeon and shadow them. Whereas, how do you then lobby the government of Guatemala? What's the next step? Go to Guatemala, then what? And because our brains can't mentally recreate the steps, we find student B more impressive. And so the title of today's workshop is designed to show you how you can be more impressive to the admissions office. So let me quickly explain who I am. I've been helping people get into med school for 20 years. For about a decade, I was an MCAT teacher and trainer for the Princeton Review. For the past 11 years, I've been running passport admissions. We work with students on their essays and school lists and Casper and interview preparation. And then I also am the head editor of a blog called the Savvy Pre-Med. And so the Savvy Pre-Med is not just a blog. These days, it's also a podcast, which I am the host of. And I also produce weekly videos. Some of them are lovely and animated, and they're all about medical school admissions. So I'm something of a medical school admissions nerd. This is what I do for 60 to 70 hours a week. And I wanted to just share the best of my brain with you all. So the agenda for today, we're going to end right at 1 o'clock, because I know you guys are super busy. We're going to talk about how to build your narrative. We're going to talk about how to create a project that makes med schools say wow, and then you get to be the admissions committee at the end. We'll have 10 candidates. You have to choose which ones make the cut and not, and you really want to stick around for that. That's the most fun we're going to have today. There's also a special invitation. So you guys are cordially invited for a free planning meeting with me or one of the members of my staff. So it's called an introductory meeting. And so most of the students that do this are pretty close to the application cycle, and they want to know what their chances are and what it takes for them to get into their goal schools. But if you're farther from that, we can talk about your 4-year plan. We can talk about what you need to do to make yourself more unique. So you're invited for 3 free things. First is a free one-on-one meeting by Zoom. The second would be a free med school application timeline. And the final thing would be a free get on our newsletter. So yeah, so you guys are cordially invited. The link to get that meeting would be here. Just go to, I know there's forms galore today, passportadmissions.com/invitation. So you guys are cordially invited. You can go ahead and send that out now and fill it in while you're waiting, while we're kind of getting running here. So let's talk about how to build your narrative. Medical schools and all public health schools, all pre-health schools use a form of holistic admissions. And so you might have heard this term, but have no idea what it means. So let me explain it to you in one slide. Okay, so at the center of this would be your metrics. And so the GPA, the MCAT, and then the GPA trend are the 3 most important to the admissions offices. And so without this, it doesn't matter what a wonderful person you are. If you don't have some baseline level for these things, you're not going to get in. But that's just the start of the bullseye. And so above and beyond just the metrics, there are the different things that make you you, your strengths, your ethnicity, your gender, your perspectives, your empathy, your curiosity, your maturity, your core values. There are lots of interchangeable words that could go into this second bullseye. But the point there is everybody brings a different combination of those things. And beyond that, though, it's about how do these things connect to the parts of the application process. So the first thing that med schools look at beyond and above metrics and GPA would be your evidence of readiness for a healthcare career. Beyond that, it's looking at your healthcare experience. How many hours have you spent shadowing? How many hours have you spent in a clinical setting? What stories do you have to tell from those? There's also community service, not just how much have you done, but has it been in the service of a meaningful experience, of the service of a meaningful cause to you? They look at leadership, not just have you been elected something, but how have you taken ownership of the things that you've been a part of, and how have you really made them your own? They look at distance traveled. So not everybody takes as much effort to get into medical school. Some people, most of the applicant pool is privileged. And as a result, for those who aren't as privileged, medical schools want to give them a boost because they've had to overcome so much more to get to where they are. There are interpersonal skills, how well you get along with your classmates, how long you're going to get along with your patients. These are things that are explicitly measured in the interview and the CASPER. There's research. So this splits med schools down the middle. Some med schools are very research oriented, others aren't as much. And so for some, research becomes really important. They want to know whether you've participated in thesis-driven research, whether you've had a role in designing the experiments and potentially getting on a publication. Again, they don't care how long you've spent cleaning test tubes. It's all about the quality there. And then finally would be cultural competency. So that's the final thing that medical schools really look for. How well do you interact with people who are different from you? So you don't have to have all of these different things. What you need is to pick, I would say probably 2 or 3 from that outer ring that are really your strengths, that form a part of your story. And then they need to connect with the things in the inner ring. And then for the middle of the bullseye, get those as good as you possibly can. And that part seems pretty obvious, but you don't have to be perfect on the metrics to get in and have the rest of this going. So that's what it means to build your narrative. And by the way, and this is what I always tell my students, I will be the engine, you be the brakes. The only dumb questions are the ones you don't ask. So please chime in at any time. I've got questions over here. I've got the chat box right here. I would love to answer your questions as we go to make this as useful as humanly possible. All right, so that's how you build your narrative. So before we talk about how to really wow med schools, let's try to figure out what's some of the advice for choosing activities initially. So the first would be, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. You should start by getting involved in a couple of things, see what you like, and then winnow it down to the few. I would say 2 to 3 extracurriculars that are going to be really important to you over time. So many pre-meds fall into the checklist fallacy, which is essentially, if I check the things off the box, that will get me in. That won't, that'll make you look just like everybody else. So the way you start is by seeking quality in the activities that you participate in, the ones that seem to connect with you personally. And it really, there's no limit there. The second piece of advice would be to try new things frequently and push your comfort zone, try something that you never thought you'd get to do, and then of course, quit often. So it's not about just sticking with something for the sake of sticking with it. If it's not meaningful to you, it won't really help you get into medical school. So here is our pre-med timeline. And by the way, if you book one of those meetings with us, we can send you the PDF of this to talk about where you stand. This is roughly what it looks like to get through college in 4 years as a pre-med. So the courses, I think, are self-explanatory. These are the courses you have to take for your MCAT and also to get into med school. The activities aren't as self-explanatory. So let me talk about that. So the hand with the heart on it is community service, because you're helping. The stethoscope, of course, would be exposure to the field. The little person there is actually, for freshman year, it's about finding your friends. It's about finding your dinner group. It's about having that community of support, because it's really stressful to be pre-med. And then the optional question mark would be something that you do that's different that might make you stand out. So the goal for year 1 is just adjust to college, get used to it, move on. The goal for year 2 is to start stepping up your game. And so that might be where you expand upon some of the activities. A lot of times that's a good time to start research. So you continue with some service, you continue with some exposure. I know at UCLA it can be really hard to get exposure as a freshman. A lot of these programs don't allow freshmen in. So if you need to rearrange some of these icons to suit the particular 4-year plan that you have, that's totally okay. The little letter here, the little heart, is to actually start asking for letters of recommendation after year 2. They won't know you any better if you wait 2 years to ask. And so by the time you apply to med school, it's nice to have a couple letters already in your repertoire. So if you are going to go straight through to medical school and not take a gap year, the best time to do MCAT preparation is the summer after year 2. And that's going to hit a couple of you like a load of bricks. That is early. That is hard to manage. And to be ready for the MCAT at summer after year 2, you have to start college with a head of steam and know that you really want to be a doctor. So that is the best time. And then the best time to take your MCAT is September. For students on the quarter system, it's September following the summer where you prepared like crazy. You can have a backup date, January, April, or May, or right now, nobody knows because the MCAT is not open for registration. But the goal would be to make room in your life to take the MCAT twice, not because you have to. Ideally, you take it once and knock it out of your life, but you might have to take it twice. So you can see years 3 and 4, if you're going to go straight through, you apply as early as possible in summer after year 3. So typically that's early June. This year it's May 28th. This is the first day you can apply. Now you don't have to submit on day 1, but you don't want to wait until August or September to apply if you can help it, because it's rolling admissions. So the later that you apply, the harder it is to get in. So this is our broad 4-year plan, and now would be a great time, if you guys have any questions about it, to chime in. If you have any questions about what you should be doing, yeah, I'm game to answer them. While you guys are chiming in, I want to start talking about the way that we stand out. All right, it looks like Kevin's got a question. Please fire away, Kevin. Yeah, so those who are about to graduate. So this is probably more of a plan in terms of what you need to do to get in. And so this is what we call our application timeline. Oh, you decided on the pre-med track as a senior. Okay, so that is interesting. And there's a lot more nuance and complication to it. So you would be what's called a non-traditional pre-med. That's not a bad word. Med schools love non-traditionals. And you'll have to find a way to get in all of the things I've just been talking about, but without the benefit of being on campus. It may make sense to do a post-bac program. It may not. It may make sense to go get a job as a scribe or an EMT. It may not. That's a wonderful question for one-on-one, but there's no set track for those who are after college, just because there's so many moving pieces. You have to support yourself, you know, who knows? That's a great question, Kevin. Uma says, if you decide to apply after taking a gap year, would it be okay to push studying to after third or fourth year? Yes, and actually, that is a piece of advice that I used to give that people would bristle against. These days, there's so much to get into your life that it can be really hard to be ready to take the MCAT after the summer. So I broadly recommend a gap year. It's the last free year of your life. You know, when you go to med school, you don't have a life anymore. So what would you do in the last free year before you die? So that's what the gap year is designed to do. It also then makes just the application process go more smoothly. It makes the MCAT go more smoothly, getting all those prereqs in more smoothly. You don't have to take one, but at this point, the average age for starting med school is 24. So most people don't take just one, they take two. All right, great questions, guys. Margaret says, do you recommend getting a copy of your rec letters, or is there a level of confidentiality that needs to be kept? So med schools won't believe those letters if you don't waive your confidentiality. So when you request them, you need to check the little box that says, this is confidential. I would say 99% of letters are fine. They won't hurt you. Now, depending on how well you know the person, will depend on how good the letter actually is, how much it helps you. But I wouldn't worry about signing away that right. It's not like they're going to say, oh, Margaret is awful. She should never be a doctor. I would never want her to take care of me or my kids. Like, that's just not how rec letters go. Rec letters, like bad rec letters, are vaguely positive. They're full of adjectives. They're short and they're fine, but it's not going to be hurtful. So do go ahead and waive that. Perfect. All right. And then Margaret asked, what do you recommend doing during a gap year if we were to take one? Well, what I'm about to talk about is, so that's a wonderful transition into the capstone. We also have several articles about the best gap years on our blog. So if you check that out, there's like all kinds of interesting things that real pre-meds have done that'll give you inspiration for how to spend it. But it basically depends on you. You need to build on a strength, you need to work on a weakness, and you need to do something that is just for you to love life. So that's the short answer. All righty. I'm going to come back. These are awesome questions. I see the ones in the Q&A. We're going to come back to them as we go. And yeah, I want to quickly talk about how you actually stand out. So the first thing to say about standing out is you may already stand out. If you spent a year living in your car because you had nowhere else to go, you stand out. If you're the first in your family to go to college, you stand out. I will never forget the student who came up to me after last year's presentation at UCLA who had immigrated to the United States by herself, was still supporting family in overseas, and was working 3 jobs to make ends meet and was still getting good grades. And her question to me is, I'm just worried I don't stand out. And the answer is, yes, you do. So understand that this blueprint is for people that really are pretty average for applying to med school. These are people that have faced little to no adversity, who have good grades in MCAT, but not great, and maybe who have a typical pre-med checklist. So that's the design of this. And I don't want you guys to feel discouraged by this. You don't have to do it, but it is available to any of you to try to accomplish. So the idea is called a capstone project. I borrowed this term. I borrowed it from architecture. It literally refers to the stone that holds the rest of the arch together. I borrowed it from engineering, where it refers to a year-long project that you do senior year as like a culmination of all that you've learned. So the pre-med capstone project is something you do that makes med schools say, wow, here's an example. 2 years ago, I met a student who'd gone to UCSD. He had a 3.6 GPA, which is fine, but won't make you stand out. He was scoring a 5.12 on his practice MCATs, which is a fine score, but it won't make you stand out. And his extracurricular checklist read like couple hundred hours of clinical volunteering, about 50 hours of shadowing. He'd done community service for about 200 hours. He'd done a little bit of research. Check, 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 check. By the time he applied to med school, he was the founder of a nonprofit organization that taught Alzheimer's patients to swim. And med school said, wow. And he got interviews all over the place, multiple Ivy League med schools. I mean, it was just crazy. And he was able to make that happen in a gap year while he was applying, he took an extra year to continue to work on his organization. So that's the premise here, is how do you make that? Well, you start by making a list of the things that you have and the things that you want to work on. So what are your strengths and resources? So personal strengths, are you an organizer? Are you good with technology? Are you good with people? Are you a good speaker? Are you more of a creative type? Make a list of your strengths. Resources would be, do you have access to people with money who might donate to something worthwhile that you're doing? So that's thing one. Thing two is to start thinking about what are the problems that you'd like to solve in your life, and think big. So it's not going to be a problem that you have no exposure to. It's going to be a problem that you've already seen. Here's a small example. I had a student who was volunteering in a hospital. She consistently noticed that the waiting rooms were sparse. They had little reading material for kids and they had few toys. So she solved that problem by going to local toy stores and getting them to donate toys to her hospital. So she got 5 toy stores to donate toys to the hospital, and she set up a recurring way to do that so that future generations of volunteers could continue the toy donation program. That's a small capstone project. It's spotting the problem and it's solving it. Now, here's the other thing you got to do. You got to innovate with the way that you solve it. So that essentially means you need to try to solve it in a way that few other people would have done in the past. What do I mean by that? So we'll talk about what the innovation part looks like. So steps for the capstone: first, you got to get involved, and you got to build your credibility in the organization. After that, you got to rise to a leadership level so that people see you as a leader and they will follow your direction. After that, you find a problem to solve. What's something that your organization can tackle? I remember working with the president of a sorority whose problem that she wanted to solve was the high level of anxiety and depression among the members of her sorority. And so she did that through innovating. And the innovation was getting access for her sorority to online anxiety exams and online anxiety coaching. And so it was, she helped build the program in conjunction with some researchers at a different university, and she tested it out on her sorority girls. And it was great. It was really interesting. So here's an example. Let's say you join a homeless organization, and let's say your first step is just stepping out from behind the buffet line to actually eat dinner with the residents. Maybe you really like it, so you become the president of the organization. Then you think about, okay, well, what is the problem that I want to solve? When you talk to residents, you assess your resources, and it turns out that the person that, a former student of ours that did this, spoke fluent French. So what he did was go and volunteer over the summer at a homeless shelter in France. He got so many good ideas to implement in his home homeless shelter that he became the author of a series of improvements in curricula for homeless shelters all across the state that he lived in. That's his capstone project. So I'm giving you examples galore. Let's see how well you've interpreted them. So I need you guys, I'm gonna give you a capstone project, and you type into the chat box whether or not this is a good capstone project. So create a recycling program for your dorm. Is that a good capstone or no? Say yes or no in the chat box. So this is a hard one, that's for sure. Grace says dorms already have recycling, so no. I think you're on to something there, Grace. You guys are pretty split on this. So we're evaluating, it's got to check 3 different boxes. It needs to solve a problem. It needs to have sufficient resources, like big enough. It has to have like a scope to it. And then it needs to innovate. And so this one fails because it's not innovative. Making a recycling program is just something that feels like 3 decades old. It's not that innovative. It already exists. So that is not a good capstone project. It's not innovative enough. Here's one: creating a music therapy program at a local hospital. Yes or no? Okay, perfect. Yes. So let's assume that they're not creating something that the hospital already has. Um, Otherwise, it's a yes, this is sufficient scope. Does solve a problem, and it does innovate. And this is a real example. I had a student a long time ago who brought his guitar into his hospital volunteering, and he instantly became the most popular volunteer in the history of the program because nurses and other professionals would take him from room to room. No, play for my patient. No, play for my patient. No, play for this patient. He ended up getting to play guitar regularly with a patient dying of cancer. And when the cancer progressed to the point that he could no longer talk, the parents of that patient gave him a huge hug and said, "Thank you for making my son's last days on earth more enjoyable." So he went on to form a music therapy program to connect the musicians at his college with the hospital so that people could continue to spread the love. And I thought it was a beautiful capstone. Last one is to master polyphasic sleep. You may not know what this is. Actually, does anybody know what this is? I always think of Kramer from Seinfeld. Kramer from Seinfeld designed a plan to sleep 20 minutes out of every 3 hours. So the idea is if you sleep consistently 20 minutes out of every 3 hours, you never have to sleep through the night. So if you tally all that up, it's only about 4 hours of sleep during the day instead of the full 8 hours that you need, and you can feel just as rested as if you did 8 hours. And so the question is this a good capstone project? And the answer is, and the answer, you guys are onto it, no. It does solve a problem, which is we all need to do more in our day. It is innovative, it's very strange, but it's not sufficiently, it doesn't have sufficient scope. It's just about you. It's not about the other people in your life. Kevin, the only way I could think that's unethical is if you're forcing everyone else in your life to do it along with you. That would probably be a little cruel, at least, maybe not unethical. All right, so there are our possible capstone projects. You can see the ones that are good and the ones that fail, kind of why. And so I hope that will inspire you to take on a capstone project of your own. You know, it's one of those things where you need time, for sure. It's so hard when you're so busy. You need consistency and dedication to it. And really, you just need an imagination and follow through. So it is available to any of you all, regardless of where you are, regardless of even whether you're stuck at home, and which we'll talk about in a second. So now is a good time, before we go to our mock admissions committee, I would like to answer some of these questions that have come up. And so let's do this. I'm going to answer the questions in the question and answer box, because that's what I was ignoring that earlier. It looks like I've got a question up here from someone that says, do we start the MCAT testing in fall quarter? Can we do it earlier, like in June, to have time to retake it? So you want to have a proposed preparation plan that allows you to take the MCAT twice in about a 4-month period. So you want to have an MCAT date and then a fallback date in case you don't do well. So if you take it in June and your plan is to apply in June, there is no fallback. So that's okay if you are otherwise stuck, but you ideally would be able to take it twice. So a great plan would be, if you're not taking a gap year, you study for it summer after sophomore year, you take it in September, and your fallback plan is January. What's nice about January is it's right after Christmas break, so you can go home and ignore your family and just spend your whole Christmas break studying. It's never ideal time to take the MCAT. That works really well. Another way would be to take it for the first time in January, to have a fallback date of April or May. And beyond that, it's not ideal, at least. All right, second question I see here is, what do you, so it says, is it a problem I wasn't able to get any clinical exposure in my first year, but still want to go to med school straight after college? It can be a problem. It's hard to get sufficient clinical exposure, and it's hard to get sufficient kind of resume building if you don't start early. So I would just urge you to be patient with yourself. Try to get a sense for where you stand. If it's something where you feel like you need help, or if you feel like you need the extra time, take it, because it's really hard to get into med school or any of these pre-health schools if you don't have sufficient clinical exposure. It's like saying, I really want to devote my life to this thing that I don't know that much about, and so they're not going to take you if that's the case. All right, what do you recommend doing in your summer after first year, especially with social distancing in place? That is the episode of the podcast I'm releasing this week, is how to get involved from your home. Let me give you one just awesome example. Right now, the thing that we need most in this world, aside from actual tests for coronavirus, are contact tracers, which are people who, if somebody is known to have coronavirus, they have to interview that person, and they have to talk to each of the person's friends and family to see whom they interacted with and when, to alert them to self-quarantine. It's immensely time consuming, and we don't have enough volunteers to do it. unless you help. So this is a wonderful way to get exposure to the healthcare system in our society. You'll have fascinating stories to tell as a result of it. You're working hands-on with people who are very different from you. It's the best possible volunteering that I can imagine. So that would be a great place to start. You could also take a look at the blog post this week is full of about 40 different ways to get involved from home. So that's what I would recommend. Go take a look and figure out the ones that really speak to you. All right, Vivian says, do med schools like seeing minors? And the answer is they don't care about minors. If you make a list of the 100 things that will most get you into med school, a minor probably would be at number 103, 106. It's like, yeah, it might help vaguely, but it's just not something that matters that much. So I think taking a course in statistics is good. I think doing research is good, but whether you did a minor is totally irrelevant. All right. Can we start our capstone project in our first year and build it up? Absolutely you can. Absolutely you can. The hard part is just before you figure out the big problem you want to solve, you generally have to get involved first. I mean, you can't really execute a capstone project all by yourself. You generally need other people to work with you. So I would encourage you guys to, I wouldn't worry about it as much in terms of just getting started year one. It's more like a years 3 and 4 thing. And then I see a question that says, would you say that the capstone project needs to be directly relevant to medicine in order for it to be effective? No. Let me see if I can give you an example. Well, the homeless shelter example is not directly related to medicine that I gave you. You can do a capstone in almost anything. Most of the ones that I'm thinking of are related to medicine because they're pre-meds who want to go into medicine, but you can really do any of that stuff. Okay, and so looks like I've got a couple more questions that have come in, which is, how do we get involved in contact exposure? Yeah, so again, savvypremed.com, go check it out. There's an article that lists that experience in it, so you can figure out how to do contact tracing. Or you can Google it, yeah. And so then it says, I haven't done research in my undergrad, post-bacs, SMPs aside, are there any opportunities for research? Yes, the answer is yes. There are lots of opportunities to get paid to do research. You have to start somewhere, so it might be volunteer, but generally around a college campus, there are a lot of people that don't go to that college working in the research labs. So that's perfectly okay to do. All right. All right, I see a couple questions that came into the chat box. Let me quickly glean them. Who will be the admissions readers for med school applications? That's a great question, Jeffrey. It's a combination of 3 different people. First would be current medical students. Second would be faculty at the med school. So these are people who are doctors who also do research, typically, teach. And then full-time admissions officers. They don't even have a background in science. So you have to appeal to all 3 of those audiences, which generally means your application needs to have a wide appeal. All right. Let's see. Nadia says, do other pre-health students all let's see. All right, so Christina posted a COVID volunteering in LA opportunities. That sounds good. Okay, Kevin, I got your question. Oh, Margaret asked about double majoring, and the answer to the double majoring is exactly the same as the answer to the minoring. Double majoring is way down the list, maybe number 62. So a little better than minoring, but it's not a way that'll make you stand out. All right. And then last one before we get to our mock admissions committee, is it preferable to have most of your extracurriculars contribute to one spike or angle, or is it better to have them span different passions and interests? Yeah, I would say well-rounded candidates are easier to find than candidates who have really focused in on one particular cause or one particular interest. So it's better to be pointy than well-rounded. All right, so here's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna talk about, I'm gonna let you guys be the admissions office, and you get to pick which of the following 10 students you want to offer an interview. So you gotta pick 5. And so I'm gonna list the candidates here. And what we're gonna do is there's going to be a place for you to vote. And so I'm gonna put the link right here into the chat box. This is the poll. And so the poll, if you follow that link, should give you a place where you can vote on the 10 different candidates. And you can pick up to 5 that you would want to interview. And so we'll then get to see the results live and to see which ones you guys choose. So 3 basic things about each candidate. So this is a vast simplification of the admissions process, but I think it really is what the admissions process boils down to. So the first thing you know is their GPA. So this is obviously a representative of all their metrics. So student 1, the GPA is a 3.9. The second thing you know is the student's status. So this student is underserved. So let's assume that underserved in this case means they're the first in their family to go to college. So med schools are rooting for this kind of student. And then the most distinctive thing the student has done, which is this student has a helicopter's pilot's license. So you have to decide whether to interview student 1. And so you would check the box if you wanted to interview student 1. But there's a limited number of interview spots, and there's 9 other candidates for you to consider as well. So what you're trying to do is maximize each of these 3 things. You're trying to maximize the overall GPA of your class. You're trying to maximize the status, so the number of students with ties or who are underserved. I'll talk about that in a second. And you're trying to make the most distinctive class that you can make. So that's the 3 things you're trying to do. So let's look at our different candidates. Student number 2 has a 3.7 GPA, is also underserved, comes from an underserved community, either an urban underserved or a rural underserved community. And the most distinctive thing student 2 did was to help their grandmother through cancer and recovery. Student 3 has a 3.3 GPA, is also underserved, and the most distinct thing about student 3 is that they worked as a nurse for 9 years. Student 4, 3.9 GPA. This student has ties to your med school. The student's grandfather donated a building to your school. So the student's grandfather will be fairly upset if you don't accept this student. And the most distinctive thing that student 4 has done is that student 4 was a vice president of a pre-health organization. Wouldn't it be nice to have a grandfather who's donated a building to campus? All right, student 5 has a 3.5 GPA. That student is the son of a med school professor at your med school. So by rejecting him, you're going to piss off your faculty. And the most distinctive thing that student 5 has done is that they double majored in psychology and biology, which, by the way, is the 2 most common majors for getting into med school. So it's not very distinct, is what I would say. Okay, student 6 has a 3.9 GPA, is not underserved, does not have any ties to the school. The most distinctive thing is they spent 2 years in the Peace Corps in Madagascar to teach nutrition and health. Student 7, also a 3.9. The distinction is that they speak Spanish, English, and Hindi fluently. Student 8 has a 3.7, and the most distinct thing is that they immigrated to the United States from Taiwan at age 8, along with their family. Student 9 has a 3.5 GPA, no status, but the most distinct thing is that he was a 4-year starting punter on a Division I football team. 4-year starting punter on a Division I football team. Student 10 has a 3.3 GPA, again, no status. The biggest distinction is that they were the first author on a published research paper. So your instructions are to pick 5 in our poll, pick 5, and hit submit when you're done. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes to go ahead and do that. Starting to see some submissions come through. You guys are fast. I appreciate that. Let's keep it going. Seen a couple more submit. Let's take about 30 seconds to make your final selections here. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at what our results look like. And so I don't know if these show up on your screen, but I'm gonna put them here. Let's see if we can, yeah, we'll just show this real fast. So let me pop out of presenter view and so we can present both simultaneously. All right. So candidate 1, the 3.9 GPA, underserved. Helicopters pilot's license, looks like gets a little bit of love, 9.8% of the 92 votes. So it looks like most of you guys out of 19 did choose candidate 1. And I think that's right. It is hard to find students with grades that excellent who are also first in their family to go to college, who also have a fairly unique thing about themselves. The most love looks like candidates 2, 3, and 6. So 2 was the student who was underserved and helped their grandmother through cancer and recovery, but only a 3.7 GPA. So I agree with that. The 3.3, the student who worked as a nurse for 9 years got a lot of love, which I also agree with that. Her personal statement was about having a patient's thumb fall off in her hands as she was trying to help them. They were diabetic and they hadn't treated it and their thumb literally came off. It was, yeah, gross, but at the same time, it showed exactly why she wants to be a doctor. She knows, she's seen everything. Candidate 6 got a lot of love, which is spending 2 years in the Peace Corps. So simple, how do you get into the pre-health school? Go spend 2 years in the Peace Corps. Yeah, right. So obviously that's a huge commitment and people are rewarded. But same goes for things like Teach for America. So that is a way to be distinctive and a way of giving of yourself to a cause broader than yourself, to bring back really important personal memories. And med schools love that stuff. So you guys were spot on there. Let's look at the ones that didn't get much love. So student 5, the double major in psych and bio with only a 3.5 GPA didn't get a lot of love. Student 7 with good grades, 3.7, otherwise unaffiliated, and the only distinctiveness was immigrating from Taiwan. This, to me, student 7 is the answer to the question I get all the time, which is, why didn't I get into med school? What's wrong with me? And the answer is, there doesn't have to be anything wrong with you not to get in. 60% of people don't get in. And so a lot of times it's not that you didn't stand out, or excuse me, it's not that you did anything wrong, it's just that there were other people who stood out more. There are a couple of more controversial ones on here. Student 9 here is one that would be looked on very favorably by med schools. So med schools love it when somebody is a Division I athlete for 4 years. It's so hard to do that and do all the pre-med stuff that if you can do that and still maintain decent grades, that's a solid way to get in. So go join the football team. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's see, candidate. All right, candidates. Okay, perfect. So the candidate 10 got some love. The first author on a research publication is a solid credential for research-oriented schools. I would imagine that GPA, though, is going to make it really hard to get in. That 3.3 is tough to overcome. So you guys may have been a little bullish on candidate 10, but that's okay. Okay, so what I would love to know from you guys, and I will also answer your questions as we go, just what did you learn from this exercise? What was useful about it? If you would type that into the chat bar, I would love to know what was meaningful to you from this. All right. So good to see insight on what other people think is impressive. I agree. It's not a science. There is a lot of, some people might find something impressive and somebody else might find something not at all. You will often talk to 2 different admissions officers who will say diametrically opposing things. And it's going to be incredibly frustrating to try to learn what is true when there's thousands and thousands of people who read admissions applications. So learning how to stand out, I'm glad that was useful, William. And then Uma says after a certain threshold, increasing your GPA doesn't matter. Aha. And that is generally true. Most of the pre-meds I meet at UCLA know their GPA to the 3rd decimal point, not just the 2nd decimal point. And so that's well and good, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Beyond a certain point, you're smart enough to do well in med school. And yeah, a 4.0 is still legitimately impressive. But absent a 4.0, everybody's got some of that, somewhere in that 3.6 to 3.9 range, and it's not that distinctive. Same would go for an MCAT score. Beyond a certain point, it's sort of like, eh. So that's an interesting, I'm glad you learned that. Let's see. being well-rounded isn't as important, and that allows me to feel okay knowing I want to focus on other passions in medicine. Perfect, good, yes. Yeah, you shouldn't feel like pressured to do everything on the pre-med journey. You can't do it all, so you gotta hone in somewhere. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Kevin, I'm glad you can see why people don't get in. It's rough out there for California residents. It's rough out there for people without ties to the school or without any kind of status. And so the standards are indeed higher, but you can still, once you know the rules of the game, you can find a way that'll work for you. That's the goal, at least. All right, so just to finish things off here, guys, let me go back to presentation mode. All right. Alrighty, let's see. So just a reminder, you guys are cordially invited to set up a free meeting with me or with some member of the Passport team. It's passportadmissions.com/invitation. Again, would love to see you guys. If you are ready to rock and roll and apply, fantastic. Good luck to you. I hope this is meaningful to you. I hope this will be useful to you in your journey. So if you guys would like to fill that out, we'll get in touch with you shortly. Otherwise, I'm going to stick around for the next 11 minutes to answer whatever questions we haven't covered yet. So any questions are fair game. I also want to make sure that you guys have my contact information. It's robh@passportadmissions.com. I'm going to put that into the chat bar. If you guys have any follow-up questions, you're welcome to ping me. Yeah, but it was a pleasure. And if you need to go because you're busy and you got a lot going on, I will not take offense. But thanks for having me up, guys. And again, you're very interactive. I really appreciate your time.